Χανίων, το ΜΑΙΧ, στη Μονάδα Διατήρησης Μεσογειακών Φυτών. Θα μιλήσει για τις τράπεζες πόρων και τη διατήρηση των μεσογειακών φυτικών και νετικών πόρων, κάτι το οποίο είναι σημαντικό και αναδείχθηκε στην προηγούμενη κουβέντα. Για το slow food, Βρυξέλλες και διεθνή, έχουμε τον Φιλίπ Ντεμπρού και τη Μάρτα μέσα και θα μιλήσουμε για το slow food και τη βιωσιμότητα. Για τα θέματα της κοινοτικά υποστηριζόμενης γεωργίας, έχουμε τον Αντρέα Καλόρη και για το δίκτυο παραγωγών καταναλωτών και τα δίκτυα συνεργασίας έχουμε τον Μάρτεν Ρόιλς, ενώ ο Στέφαν Κάμπελμαν θα μας μιλήσει για τους αστικούς αγρόκηπους στις Βρυξέλλες. Tas ήταν και στην ημερίδα που παρακολουθήσετε, αλλά είχε και ένα event και μια δραστηριότητα χθες. Οπότε δίνω το λόγο κατευθείαν στην Αδαμαντία Κοκκινάκη να μιλήσουμε για σπόρους και γενετικό υλικό.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ για την πρόσκληση.
Το κουμπί.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ και για την πρόσκληση. Θα ήθελα να έκανα την παρουσίασή μου στα ελληνικά, αλλά δεν γνώριζα ότι θα είχαν τόσοι Έλληνες εδώ, οπότε αφού την έχω ετοιμάσει στα αγγλικά, θα την πω και στα αγγλικά. Το Μεσογειακό Αγρονομικό Ινστιτούτο Χανίων είναι ένα Ινστιτούτο στα Χανιά που προσφέρει σπουδές, μεταπτυχιακά προγράμματα σπουδών και η μονάδα μας είναι για τη διατήρηση των μεσογειακών φυτών. So I will continue in English, as my presentation is in English. When we say plant genetic resources, we include both wild and cultivated plant species, and they are fundamental for human prosperity and are directly or indirectly linked with quality food and quality agriculture. And we mean all plants. Plant genetic resources are not only what we use for food and agriculture, it is everything. Now, especially for food and agriculture, according to also the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources, they are defined as cultivars, breeding lines, and genetic stocks. Here we have basically all the varieties, the commercial varieties that are used, old and modern ones. The land races and primitive forms, which are the traditional varieties or the local varieties. Crop wild relative species, and utilized wild species. When we say utilized, we mean wild species that are used for medicines, for materials, or for any other human use. Now, one of the issues that we are concerned with at our unit is that there is no clear line separating which of the wild plant species are also genetic resources for food and agriculture. Many wild species are already used, and many could possibly be used, and we don't know this yet. So it could even be almost 100% of the plants. They could also have use for food, some kind of utility. Now, in the Mediterranean, the Mediterranean region is very important. It is the third richest region in the world in plant species. Out of about 25,000 species, 50% are endemic. Endemic means that these plants are only in the Mediterranean and nowhere else in the world. Also, though, it is amongst the 4 most significantly altered biodiversity hotspots on Earth. And this is altered mainly due to human intervention. It is urbanization, it is tourism, it is agriculture, and many, many other factors. Here we have a picture of the region with the line showing what we consider the Mediterranean region. And in red you can see these hotspots for biodiversity. You can see that it is mainly the islands and the south of Spain, north parts of Africa, and of course in Greece we have a very big region. It is Crete, all the islands, the Peloponnese, and south and central Greece. Now, only 4.7% of this region that we saw is covered with natural vegetation, which is also one of the reasons why we have so many hotspots there and why it is such an important area. 4.7% is very, very low. Okay, specifically about the crop wild relative species, there are many definitions for them, but a very common one is that they are relatively closely related to agricultural and horticultural crops. Usually any species that is in the same genus as a crop is considered a wild relative, according to this definition. There has been an analysis showing that about 80% of the species in the European and Mediterranean flora are crop wild relatives, or other species of socioeconomic importance, which is again a very high percentage according to this definition. Now, very few of these are conserved ex situ. There are very few ex situ collections of crop wild relatives, 2 to 6% worldwide. Now, ex situ collections means seed blocks of these species stored in a gene bank, a seed bank, not in their natural environment. That's what we mean with ex situ. When we talk about in situ conservation, we will talk about on farm for the cultivated species, or in its natural biotope for the wild species. Okay, here we have a picture with the 8 centers of origin for the crops, for the wild relatives of the crops. And the Mediterranean region is one of these 8 centers of agrobiodiversity. So here we can see it written also. It is the Mediterranean center, countries bordering the Mediterranean Sea, among the 8 Babylon centers of diversity. Now in Crete, our unit works mainly with the flora, wild and cultivated of Crete, but we are also in a network with other Mediterranean countries, and we have some cooperation. So we have 2,000 wild plants. About 10% of them are endemic to Crete, which means only in Crete and nowhere else in the world, not even in other areas of Greece. It is one of the centers of plant diversity at global level, and conservation actions are needed. Comparing it to the other islands of the Mediterranean, it is considered one of the richest in flora. Now, genetic resources for food and agriculture, we have a number of traditionally cultivated local varieties. We also have many useful wild plants. The Cretans eat a lot of their wild plants. And unfortunately, not all of this wealth is recorded, and maybe a lot of it has already been lost or is in danger now of being lost, especially the cultivated traditional varieties. On the right there is a picture of a herb which we call malopira, and we drink it in some kind of mountain tea, we call it. It's one of the wild species that we use. Now, we are involved both with ex situ conservation, which means we store seeds in the seed bank, and we are also doing some in situ work with conservation in the natural biotope for wild plants. We have about 1,000 collections for wild plants, and maybe about 500, around 500 for cultivated species. This is a picture of the seed bank. For the wild plants, we are concentrating mainly on the endemic and threatened plants of the island. However, we should be also doing a lot of work with the wild relatives of the crops, which is something that has not been done on the island and in many places in the Mediterranean. Okay, it was founded in 2000, so it is relatively new. Now, it is the first regional seed bank in Greece, and from this 12-13 year experience, we believe that the creation of regional seed banks to cover the whole of Greece is an efficient and economical solution for conservation of local plant genetic resources, improved management of these, and also for direct contact with local farmers and other stakeholders. Another issue that I didn't write here is also that the conservation done in a seed bank with the conservation done on the farm or in situ in the wild, they are complementary. So it is good to have them in the same area, not to have the seeds of Crete in Svalbard in the north or in a very other big gene bank. It is good to have duplicate collections there, but not your main collection. We believe that this local seed bank suggestion would be good for the whole of Greece, but also for other Mediterranean countries to have their genetic resources conserved locally. Now, we are a member of the European Native Seed Conservation Network, which is a consortium of 24 members and 6 associates when it started. You can see the countries. We are also in another network, the GenMeta, which is with countries also from the African side of the Mediterranean. We are currently involved in another project where again we have a network of countries. I have not showed these. It is the Mediterranean islands, 6 Mediterranean islands for wild plants, conservation of wild plants. Some of the actions that we do together. We were also involved in a project called Reverse, which was regional exchanges and policy making for protecting and valorizing biodiversity in Europe. Now this was more general. It was not only about plants, it was also about animals and generally about biodiversity. I will say something very quick about this. Again, it was a European partnership. You can see here with the dots countries. Now, we produced a case study book with 47 successful experiences about concrete initiatives for conserving biodiversity while boosting economic development. You can find this and download it on the site of the Reverse project. It is Reverse Aquitaine EU, as well as another guide for with recommendations for policy for the conservation of biodiversity in Europe. Now I will close with this. One of the good practices was the valorization of land races with European labels. So there was an example in Umbria. There were 3 products of land races which acquired European labels of origin. The lentil of Castelluccio di Nozia, a local spent, it is spelled a kind of wheat, and a wine made with a native grape variety, the San Contindo of Montefalco. Now, the adoption of these European labels of origin enabled to increase the market value of these products, and therefore their cultivation was enhanced. It can be a suitable strategy for enhancing on-farm conservation in all European countries. I know it has been done in other areas in Greece. For example, in Santorini, it has been done for the Santorini tomato and faba bean. Not always very successfully though, when it is not always very successful. Usually people do not want to pay for this. The farmers do not want to pay, but I think some education is needed, and maybe the cooperatives will help in order to make this better. And of course it helps with the conservation of the land races. Now, I will end here. Thank you very much.